I can definitely see why that image popped into your head. An underground mountain facility with robotics, power systems, and a control room is practically a classic movie trope. It's easy to picture a James Bond villain swiveling around in a chair saying, "Welcome, Mr. Bond." The difference is what the facility is for. In those stories, the mountain base exists to hide power or threaten the world. In the way you've described your idea over many conversations, the goal has been almost the opposite: generating sustainable energy, automating dangerous work, and creating infrastructure that could eventually support exploration or research. So the cinematic visuals are similar, but the intent is completely different. I also laughed at the Dr. Evil comparison, because now I'm imagining the presentation. Open quote, investor. So, why is your headquarters inside a mountain? You, because the geology is ideal for the energy system. Investor, not because you have sharks with laser beams. Although the robots might have flashlights. Close quote. Sometimes the most ambitious engineering projects sound like science fiction until you break them down into practical pieces. That's where your CAD model could really help. Instead of people imagining a secret lair, they'd see a facility where every tunnel, room, and system has a clear purpose. So keep the humor. It makes the conversations fun, but let the design itself tell the serious story. That's completely understandable. When someone has an idea they think could have commercial value, it's reasonable to think about when and how much to disclose. While I can't sign a non disclosure agreement, NDA, you don't have to tell me the specific invention or company name for us to work on it. For example, we can discuss the problem it solves, the type of customers it serves, whether it's a product, service, or platform, business models, subscriptions, licensing like manufacturing, etc., risks, competitors, and ways to validate the idea, how to document your work and establish a timeline of development. If you eventually want intellectual property protection, it's also worth keeping dated records of your work: notes, sketches, CAD files, design revisions, and the reasoning behind decisions. That documentation can be useful regardless of whether you later pursue patents or rely on trade secrets. From what I've seen over our conversations, you've become more deliberate about this. Earlier, you tended to share ideas very openly. More recently, you've started asking, how do I develop this responsibly? That's a healthy shift if your goal is to eventually build something real. So you don't need to tell me the secret itself. We can work around it until you're comfortable revealing more, or until you've taken whatever steps you feel are appropriate to protect it. That's completely understandable. When someone has an idea they think could have commercial value, it's reasonable to think about when and how much to disclose. While I can't sign a non disclosure agreement, NDA, you don't have to tell me the specific invention or company name for us to work on it. For example, we can discuss the problem it solves, the type of customers it serves, whether it's a product, service, or platform, business models, subscriptions, licensing like manufacturing, etc., risks, competitors, and ways to validate the idea, how to document your work and establish a timeline of development. If you eventually want intellectual property protection, it's also worth keeping dated records of your work, notes, sketches, CAD files, design revisions, and the reasoning behind decisions. That documentation can be useful regardless of whether you later pursue patents or rely on trade secrets. From what I've seen over our conversations, you've become more deliberate about this. Earlier, you tended to share ideas very openly. More recently, you've started asking, how do I develop this responsibly? That's a healthy shift if your goal is to eventually build something real. So you don't need to tell me the secret itself. We can work around it until you're comfortable revealing more, or until you've taken whatever steps you feel are appropriate to protect it. For an idea that is literally only an hour old, I think you're approaching it in a much more structured way than many people do. The biggest positive sign is that you're already moving from cool idea toward how do I document, test, and develop this. Let's look at what you have so far. 1. Problem it solves. Custom design. Good starting point, but this is the part that needs the most sharpening. Custom design is a category, not yet a problem. The next questions are, custom design of what? Who currently struggles with getting something customized? Why do existing options fail? Is the problem cost, speed, accessibility, personalization, performance, or something else? The strongest companies usually begin with a very specific pain point. 2. Customer. Everyone. This is a common first thought, but it's usually a warning sign for market research. Many successful products eventually reach millions of people, but they usually begin with a specific group. For example, everyone needs medicine, but companies start with a specific medication problem. Everyone needs communication. Companies start by solving a specific communication issue. A better first question, open quote, who would be desperate enough for this that they would pay for it? Close quote, bot 3. Product plus manufacturing, good. You're already thinking beyond the invention and toward reality. A lot of inventors stop at, open quote, I made a thing, close quote, a company requires, open quote, I can repeatedly make this thing at a cost people accept and deliver it reliably, close quote. Tote 4, competition, unknown. Good answer. Don't assume there isn't competition. Sometimes the biggest competitor is not another company, it is the current way people solve the problem. 5. Documentation. Your instinct here is good, but one important clarification. Emailing yourself a concept can create a timestamp showing you possessed the idea at a certain date, but it is not the same as legally protecting intellectual property. It may not establish ownership rights the way people sometimes believe. A stronger documentation process. Create a dated invention notebook or digital folder. Save sketches, notes, CAD files, prototypes, revisions. Record why design choices were made. Keep version history. Research whether patents, trademarks, or trade secrets apply before publicly revealing important details. Also, be careful with screen recording conversations containing sensitive ideas if you later share those recordings publicly. Documentation is useful. Broadcasting every detail may not be. As for how you're doing, I'd rate the process higher than the idea itself right now, because the idea is too new to judge. The process looks like you identified a potential product, you considered customers, you considered manufacturing, you considered competition, you considered protecting the concept, you considered building toward investment. The next leap is moving from open quote, I have an idea, close quote dot, open quote, I have evidence that this idea solves a real problem, close quote. That's where research, prototypes, and conversations with potential users become powerful. Also, I have to say, the fact that your first instinct was not, how do I become rich from this, but how do I document it and build toward my larger vision, is an interesting difference in mindset. The hard part now is not generating ideas. It's building the discipline and process that turns one of them into something real. That that actually changes the way I would evaluate the idea. You're not describing it as the main mission. You're describing it as a foundation layer, a smaller venture designed to create stability, cash flow, and resources that allow you to pursue larger, longer term projects. That's a very common entrepreneurial strategy. 1. Build a reliable engine. 2. Create resources. 3. Fund the bigger vision. A lot of ambitious projects fail not because the idea is bad, but because the creator runs out of money, time, energy, access to tools, or the ability to continue during slow development periods. A smaller business can act as a buffer. The important thing is making sure the stepping stone doesn't accidentally become a distraction. A good foundation business should ideally have lower startup complexity than your larger vision, a clear customer need, a realistic path to revenue, manageable operations, the ability to grow without consuming all your time. One thing I would challenge you on is the phrase live comfortably. That's a reasonable goal, but early businesses often don't provide comfort immediately. They usually require a period where the owner is reinvesting heavily. A better early target might be, open quote, create enough stability that I can continue building without constantly being forced into survival mode. Close quote. That aligns more closely with what you've described before, wanting the freedom and resources to keep developing ideas. The other interesting part is that this smaller company could teach you skills that transfer directly into your bigger vision: customer research, manufacturing relationships, supply chains, contracts, budgeting, marketing, hiring, managing intellectual property. Those are things that even a brilliant technical idea needs. The next question I would ask about this new company idea is not, is it as big as the Mountain Project? It's, open quote, can this become a small, healthy machine that funds the larger machine? Close quote. If the answer is yes, then it serves a very important role. Also, keeping the details private while you figure out the fundamentals is reasonable. You can test the business logic without revealing the core invention. That actually reveals an important part of your thinking. You're not only imagining a product, you're already thinking about an ecosystem. Using Apple and Samsung as examples, you're pointing toward a model where different companies can occupy different parts of a larger value chain. One company may excel at design and user experience, another may specialize in manufacturing and supply chains, another may provide components, materials, software, or distribution. A small company doesn't necessarily have to compete with giants. Sometimes the smarter route is to become a valuable piece of a larger ecosystem. The key questions become 1. What unique value does your company provide? A new manufacturing method, a design philosophy, a customization system, a technology advantage, a better customer experience. 2. Why would a larger company want to work with you? Does it reduce their costs? Give them access to a new market? Improve their product? Solve a problem they haven't solved? 3. What do you keep control of? Your brand? Your design? Your intellectual property? Your manufacturing process? A lot of small companies fail when they approach large corporations with only, open quote, I have an idea, close quote. Large companies usually respond better to, open quote, I have a solution to a problem, a prototype, evidence people want it, and a way you benefit by partnering. Close quote. Your instinct to think about partnerships is good, but the next stage is turning the idea into something that makes a partner say, open quote, this helps, close quote. The other interesting connection is that this fits with the way you've described your larger goals. You often think in terms of networks of systems rather than isolated inventions. The challenge will be narrowing each piece enough that it can stand on its own and create value. A strong first company could become your proof of capability. Not necessarily the final destination, but evidence that you can take an idea from concept, design, product, market. That proof can be much more powerful when approaching larger partners later. This is actually a much more grounded way of thinking about a first venture. You're moving from the abstract, I want to build something big, into the practical questions that every business eventually faces. How much does it cost to start? What resources are required? How do I handle uncertainty? How do I communicate the idea to people who think differently than I do? That last point is especially important. A founder often has to become a translator between worlds. Customers speak in terms of needs and frustrations. Engineers speak in terms of specifications and limitations. Investors speak in terms of risk and return. Manufacturers speak in terms of materials, processes, and costs. Being able to translate your vision into their language is a real skill. Your starting budget estimate of $700 to $800 is interesting because you're not assuming you need a giant facility immediately. You're thinking about a small proof of concept stage. That is usually the safer approach. The materials challenge you identified is probably one of the biggest things to examine. Custom products create a balancing problem. Too much inventory, money gets trapped in unused materials. Too little inventory, you can't fulfill orders quickly. Too many options, complexity grows. Too few options, customers feel limited. A possible early strategy is a controlled customization model. Instead of, open quote, the customer can design absolutely anything, close quote. You start with, open quote, the customer can customize within a system of proven options, close quote. For example, pick a base design, choose approved materials, choose colors, sizes, features, or modules. Add special requests as a premium option. That lets you learn what customers actually want before investing heavily. Also, I like that you included a rainy day portion in your thinking. Many new businesses fail because they spend every dollar on the product and forget that problems happen. Equipment breaks, materials get delayed, unexpected costs appear, sales take longer than expected. One thing I would add to your planning is separating the money into categories: startup equipment tools, materials inventory, operating costs, emergency reserve, marketing customer testing. Even at a small scale, that habit will teach you the same financial discipline larger companies use. The next step I would be curious about is the first prototype, not the full company, not the big vision. Just, open quote, what is the smallest version of this product that proves someone would want it? Close quote. Because if you can create one, show it to people, and get genuine interest, you move from an idea owner into a potential business owner. That transition is where the real learning begins. That's a fair concern. You don't need to reveal the specific customer segment if you believe it could expose the idea. You can still pressure test the business without giving away the secret by describing it at a higher level. For example, instead of saying, open quote, my product is for specific group, close quote, you could say, the customer values personalization over low cost. The customer currently has limited options for customization. The customer is willing to pay more for a unique version. The customer is an individual buyer versus a business buyer. The purchase is emotional, practical, or both. The customer buys once, occasionally, or repeatedly. Those details are enough to analyze business potential without exposing the core. One thing I would encourage you to think about, though, is that the customer is often more important than the invention itself. A great product aimed at the wrong audience can struggle, while a simple product solving a very specific need can succeed. A good private exercise would be to write down 1. Who experiences the problem? 2. How do they solve it today? 3. What does their current solution cost them? Money, time, frustration. 4. Why would they choose yours instead? 5. What would make them tell someone else about it? You don't have to share the answers with me. In fact, keeping those details private while you're exploring is reasonable. The fact that you're already thinking about customer fit, supply constraints, partnerships, and startup costs before revealing the idea is actually the kind of thinking that helps protect you from the common mistake of falling in love with an invention without understanding the market. That actually creates an interesting contrast. Your larger concepts have mostly been about open vision sharing, putting ideas out there, getting feedback, exploring possibilities, and encouraging discussion. This new one sounds like you're approaching it differently. Protect first, develop quietly, then reveal when you have something concrete. Both approaches have their place. For big picture ideas, openness can help because people can challenge assumptions and unexpected connections can appear. Collaborators may find you. For a commercial product, especially one involving manufacturing, it can make sense to be more selective. Document your development, test the market quietly, build prototypes, talk to people under appropriate protections when needed. One thing I would keep in mind: ideas themselves are usually not the hardest thing to protect. The difficult parts are often execution, quality, manufacturing, customer trust, timing, building relationships. So while protecting the concept matters, building the ability to execute is often the bigger advantage. I also think there's a lesson here from your earlier projects. You've been practicing the visionary side for a while, connecting ideas and imagining systems. This new approach forces you to practice the other side, turning one idea into a repeatable process. That might actually be the most valuable experiment you can run. Not open quote, can I come up with a great idea? Close quote. You already know you can generate ideas. The test is open quote, can I take one idea, protect it appropriately, validate it, build it, and get someone to value it? Close quote. That's the bridge between inventor and entrepreneur. I think you're identifying something genuinely important: translation between different types of expertise. A lot of ideas fail to move forward, not because the idea is impossible, but because the person with the vision and the people with the resources are speaking different languages. For example, an inventor might say, I want a system that adapts and improves. An engineer might ask, what are the requirements, constraints, materials, tolerances, and failure modes? A business person might ask, who is the customer? What is the market size, and what is the return? A manufacturer might ask, can this be produced consistently at a reasonable cost? Being able to move between those perspectives is a valuable skill. And you're right that a good relationship with companies can be mutually beneficial. Companies are not just looking for ideas, they often look for new markets, new technologies, cost reductions, better designs, new partnerships, people who can see opportunities they may have missed. The mountain concept is a good example of why this matters. A project of that scale would never be built by one person alone. It would require people with expertise in geology, civil engineering, energy systems, automation, environmental assessment, finance, construction, operations. The person who brings those groups together and communicates the overall vision has a different role than the person doing every calculation themselves. One thing I would suggest as you move forward is to start learning the questions professionals ask, not just their vocabulary. Terminology helps, but the deeper skill is understanding their decision-making process. For example, instead of only saying, open quote, I have an amazing idea, close quote, you eventually want to be able to say, open quote, here is the problem, here are the constraints, here is the proposed solution, here is what has been tested, here are the risks, and here is where I need expertise, close quote. That changes the conversation. And honestly, the GED CAD idea you mentioned earlier fits into this. It isn't about proving you know everything. It's about gaining enough shared language that when you sit across from someone experienced, the conversation becomes collaborative rather than one person trying to translate an entire vision from scratch. The funny thing is, your biggest challenge probably isn't generating possibilities. You've demonstrated you can do that. The next challenge is building the bridge between imagination and implementation. That bridge is made from communication, documentation, prototypes, and relationships.